Hi, I'm Chris Reed, CEO of Neometals, and I'm joined by my Chief Development Officer today, Mr. Darren Townsend.
Hey Darren, how are you?
Morning, Matt. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Okay, Chris, thanks for joining us at short notice. It's just it's kind of in response to some questions we've seen in our investment club with regards to the Hannans deal, and obviously you just put out a press release with regards to what's going on with the Vanadium. So a lot going on. So first of all, who's Hannans, and why are you doing deals with them?
Yeah, well, actually, look, it was a deal between Critical Metals and Hannans. It just happens that Neometals is a very large shareholder in Hannans and is a large shareholder in Critical as well. Obviously, we're partnered with Critical in the Vanadium recovery project, and a number of years ago, Critical Metals, we gave the rights to our battery recycling technology in Scandinavia because they had operated there for 10 years and were pretty well ingrained in that community. We hadn't thought about ever really operating that. I guess, back then we were actually focused on deploying it, the technology before SMS in North America. And it was just subsequent that we ran a partner selection process, ended up concentrating on Europe and with SMS as a partner. So, this is, I guess, the genesis of Critical Metals, and clearly the Vanadium recovery project has got massive scope, and we're still obviously proving out the lithium battery recycling technology. There are currently not yet battery production up in Scandinavia, but there will be at some stage. So, they've got Hannans, which was the original parent of Critical Metals, to farm in and fund that opportunity up to an investment decision. So it's a similar sort of transaction that we're undertaking with the Vanadium recovery project. We're funding that through to FID. We're a public company. We've got access to funds. We've got a lot of funds ourselves. So you fund that through to an FID, and that earns you a 50% interest in the project. So it makes a lot of sense for us.
It does. But it's sort of, I think for investors in natural resources, they don't sort of see these sorts of structures before. So explain why it's good for you, why it's good for Critical Metals as well, in terms of the way that you've done it.
So we haven't done anything. So it was a transaction between Critical and Hannans. We were just beneficiaries on both sides. So, essentially it's not unlike having a property and getting another company to farm in and to essentially free carry you. So, Critical is, with us is working to an investment decision at the back end of 22. So, it will be needing to raise capital to meet its commitments. The capital providers will be wanting most of the funds to flow into that which it's raising for, and won't want to see leakage into other assets, be it, the lithium battery recycling or their existing exploration portfolio. So what this is doing is relieving them of funding that opportunity, that license through to the investment decision, and yet being able to participate in it when the prize is known and when it's the asset's development ready. But, the most immediate one that Critical and Neometals are facing is the investment decision at the end of 2022 for the Vanadium recovery project. And now that's just the first Vanadium recovery project. We announced yesterday that we're now working on a second one.
Okay, so I do want to just deal with and be able to park up the Hannans deal on the the lithium recycling technology thing. Okay, because I think I actually quite liked the way that it was structured. Given that you're the main beneficiary, you're a big beneficiary of it. Let's kind of deal with it because your shareholders are keen to understand what the upside is for them. Okay, so this is specifically an agreement which deals with the 4 countries in the Nordics, right? They have to, tell us exactly how that was structured in terms of they can earn 50%. What do they need to do to qualify for that 50%?
So Hannans needs to fund through the investment, so the business development activities, procuring feedstock, supply agreements, all of that sort of stuff, so that a decision can be made. And so that would earn them 50% interest in the license.
Right, and the benefit for the grid, well, obviously for those
so
two.
So if you have a look at Neometals, we obviously through our interest in Critical, we had an indirect interest in that license. We have an indirect interest in. We have a direct interest in Hannans, which adds to our indirect interest. So if you have a look at it for Neometals shareholders, we'll have an interest of around 26% in the license via our shareholding. So that's an indirect interest. And also we get a 10% royalty or ACN 630, the owner of the battery recycling technology, which, once the demonstration plan has met certain criteria, which will give SMS 50% ownership in the IP. So Neometals will be getting a net benefit of a 5% royalty. So that'll be shared. The 10% will be shared with SMS. So we will have a 26% indirect shareholding in the license, as long as we maintain our relevant interests, and a 5% royalty, which we're very happy with.
Yeah. Okay. So, and can we expect that more deals like this? Because obviously that ties up. What I liked about it is it's kind of if the FID is positive and they go ahead and they build. And we're talking about 4 countries. I can't quite remember the 4 countries. Denmark, was it Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland, I think, from memory.
Correct.
That is a massive barrier for entry for other, because it's first mover advantage, really, isn't it? That's a massive barrier to entry.
Yeah, look, and I think, in 2019, we hadn't envisaged that there would be many battery plants, but, up there, they're blessed with hydro power. And they've got very, very supportive governments for this electrification of transport. They've got the highest penetration rates of EV in the world. And now we find that Scandinavian license area looks like it'll have 2 plants by Freya of about 83 gigawatt hours in terms of total capacity, 40 for Northvolt and 42, I think, for Morrow. So, outside of Germany, Scandinavia now looks to have the next biggest pipeline. Now, that obviously changes from year to year, but it's pretty impressive. There's going to be lots of cells produced up there. There's going to be scrap like there is in every battery plant around the world. And if they've got the highest penetration rates of EV cars, notwithstanding the smaller size perhaps than mainland Europe, you are going to get the end of life cars back quicker than in some of the jurisdictions where there's a slow take up, like perhaps in Australia.
Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, first mover advantage, fantastic, creates barriers. It also gives, in terms of global reach, for the technology, gives them that, and obviously scale and et cetera, et cetera. So you'd position that as, and I'm sure you would, as a good thing to be doing now. Will we expect to see more of these?
For Neometals? Well, no, because all of the other licenses, the licensed areas other than the existing licensees, are in the Primobius joint venture with SMS.
Got it.
Right. So what we will see is, once we do the demonstration plant, we've showcased that facility through to the various participants in the battery supply chain, i.e. car makers and cell makers with potential feed, off-takers, aggregators that want disposal services. And, we have, you'll see more commercial transactions, like we've got the MOUs for Itochu and Stelco. You will see more of those, but they'll be done at the Primobius level.
Okay. Well, I think that kind of clears some things up there. And I guess, because I noticed you didn't bother putting a press release out because, why did you?
It's not our transaction.
I know, but you're a beneficiary, and I just want to. Most companies would jump on that because they need some news. You didn't feel it was pertinent?
Well, look, after the transaction, we increased our shareholding in Hannans, and so we the change in substantial shareholder, where we've gone from 31 to 32%, was made known public. That should have been. It would be reasonable to think that was a reasonable endorsement of the prospects. I'm glad to say that's vindicated, because we bought the stock at 1 cent after the deal was done, and it's closed at 2 cents today.
There you go. Okay, should we talk vanadium? It's getting bigger and bigger. So tell us about the second deal.
Yeah, look, the second deal, the first plant is obviously underpinned by a conditional supply agreement with SSAB covering 2 million tonnes. We're now signed an MOU with H2 Green Steel for 4 million tonnes. So I think anyone's doubt that our vanadium recovery technology was just a one-off small opportunity is sadly mistaken. We are assessing a pipeline of potential feeds. This is, I guess, a clear demonstration of the benefit of our technology to the suppliers. One, we obviously pay them for a waste / byproduct, and we are be able to responsibly dispose of the waste obligations. We extract the vanadium and then we essentially carbonize the tailings, which is, what the big major mining companies are now talking about as how they see that they're going to address their CO2 issues going forward. I mean, we've been on that wagon for years. So I think the benefits are for the developers, the clients, and obviously we have to share that, and we obviously do well out of it. But, for us, where does it sit? It's a second larger opportunity after we commit to our first plant.
So where does this put you? Where does this start to put you in the context of vanadium producers globally? Because we've spoken to a few recently. They've got challenges at the moment. Vanadium price rises and falls. I get that you're low quartile, possibly low decile cost producer of vanadium. So how are you kind of facing the vanadium market at the moment? I mean, how does this thing get financed? Because we're talking about a second property, second site you're going to have to fund. And is this a welcome addition to the vanadium market? Because it seems to be struggling at the moment.
Well, the prices have picked up. They're pretty good. And, they're certainly above our forecasts in our original pre-feasibility study for the first plant, which is welcome. The market does need more vanadium to go into the lithium vanadium chemicals and the vanadium redox batteries. You've got cell makers making lithium vanadium cathodes. You've got Bolloré that's developed lithium vanadium batteries, and they're running around Europe right now. They're the most energy dense batteries you can get. There's some other guys who are probably not at liberty to say who they are. And then, we've become aware of Volkswagen testing out a nickel vanadium manganese battery to replace cobalt. So, what are the ambitions for our vanadium business with Critical? Well, I think it's pretty clear. The first plant, 200,000 tonnes. We've said that the second plant is likely we would do our evaluation studies around a 400,000 tonne per annum throughput. Now, if you added those to the output of those two plants in production at some stage in the back end of the quartile, if they're both financed and built, which I'm 100% confident of doing, then, you would be looking at the largest producer of low-cost, zero-carbon vanadium chemicals.
The current vanadium suppliers aren't going to thank you for that, are they? It's because, like I said, it seems to be they're struggling with getting people to pay attention to their stories. They're struggling with raising capital. And you're coming along in here, and it's, what's that going to do for vanadium prices? Do you think there's a big enough market, a growing market? Because redox flow batteries, let's face it, they're ways off. The technology is sort of getting there, but it's a nascent industry. It's stainless steel we're looking to kind of pick this up. And are you confident, or your funders confident that is the right move for you?
Well, look, I think any opportunity where you're got a project where you don't have to build a mine, you've got stockpiles, and you're producing down at the bottom end of the cost curve, your only challenge then is to make it bigger. Now, we've gone through the extensive test work. We're producing what we think is amongst the highest purity chemicals in the market, sequestering carbon. It's a bit of a unicorn, and so the market does need it. I look, the VRB impact. I think the impact from the lithium-ion batteries for vanadium chemistry is going to be multiple times that of the vanadium redox flow battery. Yeah. That's just my personal opinion. And that needs, and as you rightly say, 85% of it finds its way into alloying steels, right? And then you've got somewhere around 10%, going into titanium master alloys, high purity vanadium chemicals for battery applications, etc. So, it's the market is tight and the demand is growing. So the market needs projects like this. It needs the primary producers in Australia. It needs higher prices. It's getting higher prices. So I think, the longer the price stays up, the happier everyone will be. But invariably, projects at the bottom end of the cost curve, where you do have the luxury that you have a massive market that we could sell it into if we needed to for whatever, a doomsday scenario, you can still sell into the steel market at the bottom end of the cash curve, right?
Darren, but I ask you something. You've turned up. We've got to ask you something. Are we are we on schedule, on budget? Nothing come up that's going to cause you a problem in terms of delivery dates?
All of the above, all good. Yeah, all of the above on track. So everything's going well. We've got our next milestones to deliver the bankable feasibility study to SSAB in June next year, and everything's well on track for that. So all good. It's been a pleasure of a project. Actually, it's just flowed so nicely in terms of schedule. So
right. Okay.
Really happy on schedule, under budget. All good. Very happy.
Fantastic. So middle of next year is the timing on that one. Okay. And then Chris? What do you say about money at that point? I know you've got a chunk of money in the bank at the moment. Is it going to be enough to move this project forward?
Well, look, vehicle that the project's getting developed in is a subsidiary of Critical called RISAB, Recycling Industries Scandinavia AB. So, that's a vehicle that can be independently financed. So Critical and Neometals will own 50-50 of that. And, that retains, it's a bit like Primobius. We've got the flexibility to put, either project or corporate financing. One of the beautiful things is the inbound interest from all the bulge bracket banks for green bonds. We were thinking maybe sustainability linked financings at a head level, and they're just saying, well, this project is just a unicorn. You are producing high purity battery chemicals from domestic byproducts, right? Stockpiles of domestic byproducts in an environmentally friendly process that is sequestering carbon and rendering what was a metallic tailing inert, right? They are unicorns. And so they are saying, this is the greenest project that we have seen for a while. So, I have absolutely no real concern about procuring financing for this. Will we have to put equity into it? Yes, we will, Matt.
Okay. And
as with any debt financing.
Sure. With regards to, I know you've just done this, H2 green steel, nice. Are you in other discussions? I'm wondering how far you're pushing this technology globally, and how you continue to further monetize it, or have you got enough on your plate at the moment?
Well, from making an FID in 2022, we've given ourselves 2 years to build and construct the first vanadium recovery project. Though all things going equal, we can finish our evaluation studies in parallel and move a construction team up into Boden to continue the build out. Hopefully we can procure additional volumes and potentially make those two projects larger. We are evaluating other feedstocks. These feedstocks, they're not super common, but we have been able to, with our business development hat and a bit of elbow grease, find some alternate locations of stockpiles and procure samples and test them.
Okay. Look, Chris, I appreciate you coming on at quick and short notice to give us an update and answer those questions. What's the next big bit of news we should be looking out for?
So, look, the boys are just getting ready to crank up the back end of our demonstration plant for the battery recycling. We put in guidance that we would start the commissioning of the hydromet refinery in September, start the trials in October and wind them up in November. A couple of weeks ago, we announced that we were going to scale up the front end section at Hilkenbach from 1 tonne a day throughput to 10 tonnes, really to satisfy some of the demand that we're seeing in Germany for the disposal of these EV batteries. I mean, we thought scrap, we were going to have to get it off cell makers and we wouldn't make the car makers would come later with the end of life. What we're finding is the recalls, so we have found, the Hyundai Kona. And then in the last week, we've found that GM's recalled the Bolt, right? And it's 140,000 units. So, it was very, very hard for us to statistically model with any accuracy, what recalls might be possible. I mean, you just can never forecast that sort of stuff. And what we're finding is that these big car makers, they're, for all intents and purposes, other than Tesla, they're first generation EV makers. And, we're scaling up battery production at unparalleled rates, and we're scaling up the EV production at unparalleled rates. And there will be, unfortunately, recalls. And the volumes of batteries that we're seeing different volumes of batteries that we predicted 6 months ago.
So tell me this, actually. We had a conversation, Chris, with a big Tesla bull. There's only going to be one car manufacturer that's going to win in this space, and that's clearly Tesla, he said. What are you hearing on the ground floor level when these conversations that you're having with these manufacturers in terms of their intent to be able to compete and to be able to sell units of these things? We're talking about recalls.
Yeah, well, look,
but there's teething problems, right?
It's a massive paradigm shift for car makers, right? So they've never had to worry about the fuel in the cars before. Now they have to do that with the batteries. They know they have to take the CO2 out of the cars, and half of that resides in the batteries, and that's a challenge in itself, and that's what we're looking to address with the recycling. The EU has rules that are coming in mid this decade, 2025. That's going to push the disposal and closing the loop, and some pretty serious tailwinds for us, headwinds if you're a car maker, to meet. So, I think, what's the model that they're all gravitating to is the Tesla model. And people say, Volkswagen's going to produce its, I think you asked me, Volkswagen's, announced that they're going to produce its own cell. Are they too late? And I said, well, they're not too late. They're just second. There's just been a big gap in between them, right? And so Volkswagen first, then you've got Stellantis, then you've got Daimler. And so all the car makers realize that they actually have to control the biggest variable. I mean, making cars is down to, you can make cars anywhere in the world and you've got all the same mass balance, right? So other than labor and a few other things, you're going to be within a very tight band of operating costs, right? Now from left field, you've got this battery, right? And you've got to get all these funky materials alloyed in these batteries as oxides, lithium, cobalt, manganese, vanadium, whatever, iron, phosphate, you name it. And they cost money, and they need them in volumes that no one's ever considered for the supply chain. And you need to take them, you need to keep producing them with every decreasing carbon footprint. So, I mean, it's, they're in a fight to survive. And, I think custody of those batteries and ensuring that you own the batteries at the end of life will actually push these guys away from selling it to more of a leasing model going forward. So, dude, massive changes if you're an EV maker. And the big, well-funded guys are getting out there early. I mean, China as a country moved first, but now you've got Europe and the American car makers and the Asian car makers.
It's kind of interesting, actually, because you guys are going to have to get involved with kind of, we talk about the leasing model for the commodities, we're underlying commodities, right? So someone somewhere is going to have to use blockchain to kind of track this, and you're going to have to be part of that blockchain, it seems. So, on the technological side of things, it's kind of exciting, and it's I'm looking forward to see how people do that. Lots of theories and lots of ideas, but no one's really doing it at the moment. So that's something to look forward to.
There's some good guys out there for measuring the provenance and how blue and green the products are. Circular's one of those, and so the car makers are demanding that everyone in the supply chain can trace their stuff back to where they found it, invariably in the ground, or in an animal, and working its supply chain all the way through to the car. They're going through the glass, they're going through the leathers, they're going through the metals, magnets, you name them. These guys are going back to the source, and the mineral explorers and producers are going to have to come around. If you can't measure your CO2 footprint, right, and indeed probably the provenance of all of your products, complying with the whatever the ruling ESG, criteria are at the relevant period of time, you will not be able to sell into the battery supply chain. And that's what we're all doing. We're all positioning ourselves to operate in that battery supply chain. We know the success that you can have, like when we did Darren, once you get in those supply chains and you satisfy what the customer wants, they're growing, we want to grow with them. And it's, speed to market. Okay.
Well, look, Chris, congrats on the H2 deal. That's a big step up. Look forward to hearing more about that. And we will look out for the news over the coming weeks. And thanks for coming on the show.
Very welcome. Have a great day. Keep safe, everyone.